Hello everybody and welcome to episode 3 of the Victoria Miniatures Tannenburg Fusiliers series. This is a unit of 10, mix of male and female personnel here. And what we're going to do, obviously in the last episode here, we're going to work on coats, the trousers, and the red piping, and then whatever other odds and ends pop up. I don't know if you really need to see me painting the rocks any later, but we're definitely going to focus on the big three, the two blues and the reds. We've set up everything else. See, we've worked on the piping here, or the epaulettes here, even done some of the hair, faces pretty well done, until maybe we see something as we work along, that we could enhance a shadow here, pop a highlight in there, but we really need to see what's happening with the blue. And we've got the photo obviously up on screen of our finished guy, and you can see just how much more, what a difference it makes to have the golds on there, that red, and just these highlights and middle tones here on the coats and the pants. So see, there's even some touches of green here on the spats. We'll maybe throw that in also. So we're going to use some smaller brushes obviously for this. This is that Cotman here, kind of the poor man Series 7. We will be using a Series 7, and you can see this one's seen a little bit of action. Check out that nice dirty handle. It's dirty. Might even use these. Remember, these are the other, basically like the craft brush version of the number 8 rounds, but they're smaller. That was handy. We used that in the last episode. And I'll just take you right over here real quick to the Fusiliers so you can see what it is. There's one of the female versions there. And I'm going to take you to this one here where we see the heads. So yeah, see I've already done the one with the plasma pistol, but here's, you have these chain sword arms. I think one of the ones I did had the chain sword on it, so you really do have plenty of options. Let's see what, oh yeah, here we go. So again, you've got the different sword arms, plenty of different things to fill these squads out. So we're going to throw some paint out on the palette. It's going to be a little more limited this time. So your trousers, it's going to be mostly these three items right here. The sky blue, verdigris blue, made in flesh. And then when it comes to, say, the coats, you're going to see something more like this. So we're kind of keeping the highlight color the same. And what is it? It's an off-white. And we'll work with our dark gray blue. That was our original color on the coats. So again, this is that notion of, instead of looking through for 10 different colors of blue, we're just going to make our own here. And guess what? If I had to do 50 more of these, and I knew all I need to do is make these two in combination to get that same blue again, it's so much easier than trying to find 4 or 5 different blues, going from dark to light or whatever. So I hope that we're going to have some fun in this episode here, and it's going to really make a difference. All of this stuff that right now is just kind of plain looking, is really dark. It's not going to take long before that really takes on a life of its own. So we'll catch you in just a few minutes when we got the paint on the palette. We got the colors out on the palette. It's time for pants. And no, not the British version, just the regular pants. You can see just how much brighter that is right there because of some of the shading we've done. If we find it's a little too bright, I also have, remember, I've got my secret weapon stuff here, but just for the heck of it, we're also going to throw some of our original. I'm going to give that a little squeeze there. There we go. Some of our original dark blue also. Let's throw just a touch of that in there, and that'll knock it down. It's also relatively watered down. And what are we focusing on? We're really focusing on where the folds are. Especially here, not only do you have folds, but it's really facing, well, towards the light source, i.e. skywards. So what I'm going to do is drop in some of this, and yes, I've got the photos on the screen, but I've also got a color test figure here. And I can see that I want to get a little more of this. So I can have a little bit stationed right over here, get a little more of that in here. And we'll make ourselves a bit of a transition. And that's it. There we go. So sometimes you see one of your layers is a little bit too light maybe for what you wanted, and you see what I did there. I just took some of the original mix because I knew what was there. That's the key. Yeah, you could say, well, gee, if it was just a color right out of the jar, I could have done that. Well, that's a whole bunch of colors out of the jar that you would need, whereas here I could just make the adjustment as it was needed. And all of a sudden then, yeah, you don't have necessarily that huge gap in that transition there. So you just got a preview of what's going to happen 9 more times. So let's enjoy the ride as that happens. And I'm also, yes, folds, right? We're just starting to mark, okay, where's there going to be some folds? I also have to carry those through the red stripes. Can't forget about them. So whatever I do here in terms of, okay, see we made a fold there with the light blue. Gonna have to be one there with the red. Same thing, or it's gonna look weird. It's like, well, all of a sudden magically that red stripe that's on the pants, which is right next to a fold that's on the blue, now there's not a fold in the red. There's somehow the light and dark pattern that was there in the blues doesn't go through to the reds. So yeah, we don't want a situation like that. That's not going to be helpful for making these tiny figures have the expected shape and shading of something that's a whole bunch bigger, because that's what we're doing here. We're doing a little sleight of hand. We're making you believe that these little guys that are pretty much 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 tall, that they are actually full-sized. And while, yes, just by themselves, even if they were unpainted or even unprimed, they would have some shadows of their own, some highlights and such, to make it be believable as an actual realistic thing walking around. That's where we come in with the paint and the brushes, and we make that work. We make that particular magic happen. It is paint sorcery. See, and I can go in again with another. See, even just that right there. Look at the difference that starts to make. And also, you notice that we're working in directional strokes, and look at, just like that first episode, look where my hand is, even on this small brush. Even as I do this more detailed stuff, I do not have a death grip on the brush. Now, in the last episode, I mentioned some of the measures that were taken at my art school to, shall we say, reinforce certain points. And one of them was the death grip on a brush, and it was not unheard of that the brush would just be confiscated right there in the class. If the message wasn't getting across the gentle way, then the more stern method was used. Something I always toss out in my classes, and immediately everybody takes the brush, and next thing you know, they're holding it like this. Which, true story, this was at Adepticon a few years ago, and somebody who's a veteran of, well, survivor of most of my classes, I like to call him that, I was painting a little, it was a Flames of War tank, so I believe you're looking at 1/100th scale. I think 15 millimeter. And at a certain point, she just said, "All right, Jim, stop what you're doing, stop what you're doing." And I said, What's going on?" And she said, "Why don't you take a gander at how you're holding your brush?" And I swear, this is how I was holding it. I was holding it like this, painting like that. And I said, well, I needed to be using a light touch. And that's actually one of the ways you can get a lighter touch is, again, by not trying to squeeze the life out of your brush. That's the more relaxed you are holding the handle of the brush, well, it stands to reason that's going to transfer to how you're actually painting on the figure. Here we go. See, that's where I mixed a little more of my original blue into the mix. And I know to get a little more interesting color in some of the midtones and shadow areas, I even took some of that camel green that we used earlier. Put that in there. Alright, and just like I did before, so each of these poses will be slightly different. You know, this set of legs I'm pretty sure is different than the previous two, which is why I selected these. One of the kneeling guys, a couple of the guys with the legs more in an open pose. I think there's 5 different sets of legs. You know, again, some more open poses, some more in the kneeling stance. I forget which ones were the ones actually had the sitting pose. That's neat. So this is, yeah, this is a different pose for the legs here. And I think the way you saw how these work is that your connection point is right here at the waist. So an awful lot of these actually have their coats. Let's see, I think oh gosh, I can't remember what the names of all of them are. But I think even like the Rausenbergs and one other faction, I think it might be the Rausenbergs and maybe even the Soldats might share some legs because they're both wearing overcoats. At some point maybe I'll try and do a painting series on the Soldats because they were so much like the Winter Russians that I did, and I'm pretty sure that was series 2 of the Army Painter. So again, now just without even thinking about it, I dove back into my blue here to make some of those, to bring back some of the darker tone. But see here, there's a whole series of folds down in here. You got to get some of those to translate, but I can't highlight these too much because he's actually standing over this back here, you know, on the back of his leg where the pants are gathered up above his spats. You know, that's a place where you want to focus on having some lights there because that makes sense. That's going to catch the light. And okay, so now we've got, and this is the fun thing, these are the same set of legs on the guy that was firing his las gun, but the torso completely different. Obviously the officer torso, officer arms, and there's always plenty of extra little bits left over. We all love bits. And I know I've used so many little different bits that you saw my conversions that I did with the Highland Moss Guard. And I was using, oh my gosh, I was using some of her Arcadia bits in some cases. I think I was using even some of the other legions. I think there was the European legions. That's another faction there. Her Beastman faction, that's going to be probably the most interesting. That'll be the most unusual Imperial Guard / Astra Militarum that I've ever painted, that's for sure. That's going to be unique. Painted Beastmen before, but not Beastmen with Laz guns, or Laz rifles, or plasma pistols. That's for sure. So we'll just work our way again from one to the next here. And now back to another one of the female guard. Man, like we did before, we're going to focus on getting some of that light here. Not as much. Not as much here. This is almost, in a way, it's more a reflected light than anything else. So I'm going to take some of this blue. We have to tone it down. But with each next step, sometimes I'll make adjustments there. I say, well, you know, now that I've got the full-fledged highlights, say, on the knee or on one of these really exposed folds or whatever on the knee, sometimes I'll go back and say, you know, okay, I don't need to have that much dark around it. It was okay the first time. Yeah, so you didn't spend a lot of time fooling around with it. Go ahead and make that adjustment. So, you know, make it right or whatever, instead of wishing that you had. I think I try to distinguish that between the whole, I could just do this one more thing. You know, and that's where our enemy of good is always better. It's the deadly enemy of good is always better. Mostly, and the difference there is one tends to lead to things being overworked. The other, where you just say, okay, in order for this to make sense, I have to just make this change. There you're doing more of a correction rather than fiddling away at it. I have other words for it, but they're more like non-YouTube words, we'll put it that way. That whole little fussing around with stuff, not only can it lead to, things actually getting messed up, but it's like the whole spending the 25 minutes painting one single little pouch. You have, in effect, probably as much time to paint your own armies as I do, which starts with not much and goes to less. And if you find yourself, at the end of the whatever 2-3 hour window you might have to paint, and you say, good grief, did I just spend this huge chunk of that on this one little part, or essentially fussing around and repainting something that I've already painted twice? You'll get frustrated. And for you guys, this is basically your fun thing. This is supposed to be your relaxing thing. It's not supposed to be the second job or the third job or whatever. And when the thing that's supposed to be fun becomes frustrating, now you're just not going to do it as much. I still think that's one way a lot of armies go unpainted, because there's some frustration somewhere, and all of a sudden you say, you know what? I'm just not going to do that tonight. I'm going to do something else instead. So let's see, we've done the walking pose with the... Alright, so this is kind of the opposite here. See the different foot forward, so a different set of legs here. And again, we're not worried about this notion of, oh my gosh, there's a clear like stair-step pattern, one layer between the next. Well, no, we're just marking out where we want certain things to be with this lighter color. Okay. Then what are we going to do? We're going to take the darker colors, mix that in with this. And I think you can see right here, see where next to the red stripe there, look at how we sort of manage that edge there. See that? That kind of goes away now. It's not so noticeable at all. Believe it or not, it's... Even if you were to perfectly just, okay, find just the right blue to do the next layer, and then just the right blue to next... If you looked at it long enough, you would still see a stair step between them. You know, at least working this way, you're kind of blending those out. You're actually going to get a little more depth of color that way. And it's just going to take less time. So it's almost like the glazing. Remember I talked about, boy, almost that one effective glaze is practically worth 3 opaque layers. Because remember, you're tinting, you're doing all this other stuff, you're just saving little morsels of time here and there. Time better spent on other things than painting 10 opaque layers on 10 pairs of pants. What if you could make it 5 opaque layers? You just cut your whole work time in half. It means you could do a whole nother army, or have time to add more units to your army, or some individual project that there just hasn't been time for. It's going to take you a little time to get used to this sort of method, because obviously you're not doing this out of the bottle. You are mixing paint. If you're more comfortable with wet palettes, by all means use those. Not saying don't use them or anything remotely like that. You'll never see me use them, because I've explained that several times. It's just that's where my training lies as a watercolorist. We painted out of a butcher's tray, one of those metal butcher's tray with the porcelain glaze over the top of it. Heck, if I didn't have to... Well, washing watercolors out of that was a lot easier than trying to wash acrylic paint out of it, so... I'm not sure. I think I still have that somewhere. See, there's a lot of little folds here. I don't know if I've done this set of legs yet, but... See, we got a fold here. So what we're doing, just gonna grab that. Like so. And we can see some other folds here. But these cannot be as light as those other ones. So one last, here's one of the male figures. I think this is a, don't know if I've done this particular pose here with the legs yet or not. And you can see we got all kinds of gunk on this, so that's gonna look very light next to that. but I know that. See, this is also, again, in the early days, all of this stuff here that's essentially in shadow from him over the, I would just paint that equally as bright as, say, the highlights on this back of the leg, where there is nothing cast in a shadow on it. It looked okay. It's not like it looked wrong or whatever, but the more you looked at it, I know one of the things that came to mind was, well, that's really not supposed to be that light anyway. Why did I waste so much time? Oh my gosh, so much time painting highlights where there should have been midtones or shadows. I think people that know, have seen me paint for years and years and years, I know they say, oh, Jim, you're painting a lot more figures attached to the base than you used to. You used to have them on dowel rods. I'll show you an example here. I've got it, so, okay, like this. We got this little creature caster head sitting on a dowel rod. This is pretty much how I painted every figure and then stuck it on the base later. Couple reasons for that. First, the bases they tended to be more elaborate. They were marble with freehand designs. Also, I didn't have the airbrush method of priming, so there was just, we're brushing on the primer. There's no way I'm going to be able to get the brush down there and prime that stuff. I also wasn't doing quite as much with glazing as I do now. And I also realized, after the fact, just how much time I was wasting painting all this shading and everything else in parts that should have been dark anyway, or that you just couldn't see. Unless you held the figure upside down or literally ripped it off its base. And you rip it off the base and say, okay, how much shading is there? Take it one step further, and you're talking about an army on a table. Well, I think you can survive if people can't see every thread in the crotch of somebody's pants or whatever. Shouldn't be staring at crotches anyway. That's not nice. And at this point, we are just about ready to lighten up this blue just a bit. And what I'm going to do is snag my color test figure here. Let's see if we can find the legs that go with them. And now you can see, so that's where this next thing we're going to do, that's where we're taking the maiden flesh here. And we'll mix it in with our sky blue. And what looked so light before, not going to be so light anymore. So I'm going to mix up a decent batch of this here. It's also another way of keeping your paints from drying, and by decent batch, I mean this is practically nothing. Alright, take off some of the excess and you can see how much lighter that is. These final episodes, they're always really dramatic because, and I think someone just said this, they were watching it and they said, well, it just looked like there's smearing paint, and then boof, it's magic. I said, well, no, not really. What have I said? We've been setting up each of these things we've done. Each level of the process has set up the next thing. We don't have the dramatic look of these highlights without the previous mid-tone that we started with, and then those darker glazes that we put over the top of it. Remember that with the secret weapon weathering paint, that verdigris blue. So at each stage of the way, we've built off something that was already there in a previous step. So there's no magic, there's no something just all of a sudden appearing out of nowhere. It was there. We're just making it more pronounced. We're just pulling that detail out a little more. And that's what's going to happen with this particular layer here. And I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did with the layer we've been working with. If it's to lighten an area, I have the other colors just sitting right here. I can go back and grab some of those. It's the other advantage of having a decent, not only decent batch of color out on the palette, but just having the color on the palette itself. It's like a handy little guide. I know in some cases, I think we've even saved palettes. Now, I can't really save a wet palette like I could save this. Now, I could save this palette, and I would have every color that I use just conveniently right there, little swatches. So these palettes that I'm using, oh gosh, Canson, Strathmore's, bunch of different kind, make these disposable paper palettes. That's all it is. When you're done with it, chuck it in the garbage, you're done. It sure makes cleanup really fast. There's, you don't have to worry about things growing in it. Yeah, you don't have to worry about growing a new species or something like that in your wet palette. All of a sudden something evolves and now you have the palette monster that starts walking around knocking over your miniatures. You can see even with this crazy little brush, what am I doing? I'm spreading it out almost like a tiny filbert brush. You may not want to be doing that, say, with a Series 7. And that's why I've got this. So each of these brushes is designed to absorb some of the workload that normally falls, that would hit the Series 7 instead. And obviously reduce its lifetime. And there's not too many of us that have disposable cash to just go, oh yeah, I'll grab me a couple more of those Series 7s. You're usually guarding those with your life. So now, again, the shadows that we created, those are standing there real nice. And like I said, it looks like on the female characters, because of the way the pants are tucked into the spats here, you have a really tight set of folds there. So it's a little more difficult working on these. On the sets of male legs, the folds are more broad. And like I said, with the, oh gosh, what were we working on in the last episode? We talked about the lighter color. Oh yeah, it was the Epaulets there. Or for whatever reason, lighter colors just tend to work. They're more thick. And stuff like the liner paints and even the clear paints, which are effectively pretty dark, like clear green or especially clear purple, clear blue, because you don't have so much of that white pigment in there, titanium white, whatever it might be, they are just naturally thinner. So here, let's pop a little bit of this on. And I don't want the segments to run too long here. So what I may do is, maybe I don't do all 10 of these. I might do a couple of these so we don't need to see repeats. So I'm going to grab that one we've already got, and we'll do this one. So here we go. We'll just do a couple of these, and then because there's one more layer of light color. Remember I said I want to keep these segments in that 40-minute range, 35 to 40 minutes. So here we are. This episode in all likelihood is going to run a little bit longer than the previous two. Not by a lot. But there's just, you can see we got a little more detail to worry about here. And we'll do the, again, back of the legs here. And then we will darken it down just a touch. And then we're going to manage this where it's, where I got too, we don't want it to get too light too quickly. Like so. Yeah, that just needs to be a little touch lighter there. And here. So we just kind of work our way through it and say, yeah, there's too harsh of a transition there. What do? We go in there and we just, okay, let's knock down this light here just a bit. And you notice, remember we were painting the bills of the caps. That was the very last thing we did in the previous episode. And you saw how the highlights on the cap, they progressively, see how they were focused down this center line here, because what we were trying to do, we're trying to show the roundness of that. If these were highlighted equally as the front part of that bill, you're not going to have any shape. It won't look round. It'll be nicely shaded and highlighted, but it's just not going to make any sense. Won't make any sense at all. It's just like when you see people are doing a still life of something that's round, piece of fruit or whatever, and there's a lot of nice shading on it, but something that doesn't seem quite real. Now they probably didn't have reflected light on there, for one thing. They probably had things just basically highlighted equally everywhere, instead of, well, this light should have been, yes, there's light there, but not that bright of almost highlight color. So there are things I'm going to repeat, basically, and that's kind of how I enforce things, is by constantly bombarding you with them, saying it over and over again. Because the more you hear it, the more it's just going to stay with you. So, yeah, these last three, they're all pretty much same versions of what we've got. So guess what I'm going to do is one last layer here, and just a bit more of the maiden flash right, just like that. And one more level here. I may go one step later, but that's only until I see these with the red stripe done. Because if the blue color is lighter than the red stripe's not going to translate too well, so we don't want that. We'll do the same thing here, and remember I was talking about where we focus the highlights, so you see here, here, and here. Not down in here, you leave those alone. We focus up here, leave that alone. So we've got this knee here at a few of these folds. We're, again, focusing on the part that if you want something to be round, you do one point and you then kind of gradually work away from that. That's how things are going to translate as being round. Otherwise, you'll be out of luck. Yeah, I don't talk about not wanting to establish rules, but sometimes there's just physics involved. And then it becomes kind of a de facto rule. Nature imposes itself and says, nope, I'm in charge here, not you. You thought you were, but you are not. Once again, where are we focusing? Where are we focusing those lights? Out here. And here. You can see how there's not, we're not tapping away here. We're being as direct as possible. Don't want to be timid. Here is where you need to just say, all right, it's going to go here. You just go with it. Cannot be timid. See it happen a lot. You can sometimes even just look at people's palettes, and I can just tell that they were already, I don't want to say defeated by the miniature, but something close to it. Because even their palette, everything looks real hesitant there. They weren't just direct with what they were doing, and it ends up, it'll show. Obviously, practice and everything else, that is going to get you that level of confidence. Because you'll have experienced things that, you know, yeah, I've done that before. Yeah, this is what I can do here. I think it's one reason why I try new mediums or tools or whatever as often as possible, because trying new stuff, well, sometimes it can give you a new way to think about the old stuff, but now you feel that much more confident and secure about the old stuff because you have something I almost compare it to. So here's the last one I'm going to do with this light here in this segment. And like I said, we'll just wait on any possible lighter colors here until we work on the red piping and stripes. So we have something to compare it to. Back to our whole conversation about context. So again, this leg, so we're going to walk that highlight up the leg here. Work on a few of these folds. And if need be, see, we still have our old color here, and we can knock that down a touch. Spread it out a little. And nothing that says you can't even, if need be, throw a whole glaze over this. I've done that, or tint something, whatever. So there you have it. And oh look, we've worked our way back around to this. So I think we've pretty well matched what we needed to do there. I don't think we need to go any lighter. So our next step, we're going to work on the coats, and we'll get those looking a little bit lighter. We're finished with the pants, and it's time to get to the coats. Well, coats and hats. We've got that same, what is that, dark blue, or dark gray blue I think it's called, and Maiden Flesh. That's all we're doing, just those two. And now we're going to walk in here, start to get this a little bit lighter. Just like the pants, we're trying to think, okay, got to be lighter up here, but down here, in our shadows doesn't make a lot of sense to fool around and put lots of lighter colors there. Now this, ironically enough, whereas coat, what do you want to call it, comes out from the belt. You know, the belt sort of creates a pleat there. Going to be a lot of lighter colors there, just because, well, again, here, this is all in shadow, so we're not going to put a lot of light colors there. But here, I think you can see on the photograph too, you can see there's much lighter colors over there. Just have to think, okay, where is the light going to catch this? And also, when you put it in these areas here, starts to clean things up a little bit. You get more definition where the red piping and trim is, and you see even now the red cuffs, those start to show up a little bit more. And this is still just basically a dark middle tone. It's not a highlight whatsoever. But we've kept the colors simple. We haven't gotten too elaborate. Okay, we're mixing 3 different colors together and we got to get this just right. No, you mix those 2 and it's a lot easier to match things when it's just one color and then another one to lighten it. I have gone to multiple colors. That's usually when it comes to flesh tones, because you're throwing in a little extra touch of green here or whatever because flesh tones are just more complex on your face. You don't just have a skin tone, you have all these different tones. Clothes are they're mostly just affected by the color of the light that's hitting them. So it's like here on the blues, I'm going to throw in some greens, other crazy little colors in the midtones and shadows that, again, when it comes to army painting, it's not something you would have to do. But here, in an instance where photography matters, that's where we have to make sure that there's enough interesting, subtle things for the camera to capture. I do it for my armies, my own stuff, because, well, I like to use my armies as a laboratory. Always have basically at least 1 or 2 new things when it comes to basing or color schemes or just the way things are painted. The medium. That's why I chose to do the winter Russian army in oils, because I just thought, well, there's one way to really learn how to use oils in mass quantities in a hurry, and that's, well, do a whole army with them. So that was definitely a worthwhile experiment. So again, this is just that first color that we're throwing in here. And just like with the pants, at first it seems kind of light, and then you realize, no, remember how light the final layers were on the pants? Coats the same way. We have to make sure we don't get too light too fast. If you do, it is definitely possible to tone it all down. All is not lost. So here at this hat, it's just a little different shape. I have painted that head, I think, a couple of times, and this is the first time I've ever painted that particular hat in blue. I think I've painted field green a couple of times, gray, more of a camel green a few times, but definitely first time it was blue. And I suppose when I start doing my NKVD units for the winters for my Soviet army, this is more, say, 1939 era, 1941. The blue and the red will feature a little more prominently, especially in their headgear. So I think you can see where we're going with this. We're just working our way through, and just like with the pants, the coats are a little bit different on the female characters. They have this pleating on the back here, so it's going to be important to get some of that. Here, top of the hat, and then the peak of the brim of the hat. So again, I think on camera, well, no, it seems like there's also a little difference in, yeah, there's a little difference in the color too. I just figured that on camera, the biggest difference is that this new paint is going to be just glossier because it's wet versus what's on there. But no, it seems to be showing up. The next layer will really be the first one that stands out. But as always, I'm going to have some other, I always have these other colors around, so that if I, oops, you know, I went too bright with that, too fast, I can go back in, tone it down. So there's these little indentations, folds, whatever you want to call them on the hat. Got to hit those. There is a certain challenge to, say, painting something like the top of the hats when they're supposed to be dark like this, because, well, because of where they are, it's the top of the head, it's flat, that should catch a whole bunch of light. You say, well, that's got to be lighter. You know, if you're following everything that I've been saying, you would say to yourself, okay, that's the top of that hat. Really got to make that bright. But if you go too far, it won't look dark blue. You know, so you'll lose the darkness of it. It's always the challenge of painting a darker color scheme. And ironically, this is going to be the month of dark color schemes. If you look at my blog and you see the Svareg Soldats, basically they look like Winter Soviets. That's another one of Victoria's armies there, one of her factions. They were wearing white coats, and they had white snow, and there was snow on the bases, and there's just white stuff all over the place. So, and obviously, you're talking about a really compressed color range, because the only other non-white color was a little bit tan here and there, the skin tone, and then some of the helmets. Actually, yeah, maybe the helmets were green, although I think the helmets were actually white too. So, yeah, there was just a whole lot of light colors and in a very narrow color range. And here we're just see his arm is stretched out. We're gonna use these brush strokes to follow that line. We've got a few here on the waist. Just a couple of those. That's in shadow. Swing back around. Do some of these. Also have to remember to get up in here too. In those sleeves. Looks like we have one last female character to do. And sorry if the camera shakes. I guess down the line that's something I may try to get, and that's a table that's a little less on the shaky side here. It's a steel table, but it's an old one, and it's, well, it's not so much the table. The camera mount is so close to me that it's very sensitive every time I touch the table. Back in the old days, I worked on a solid oak wooden drafting table with a shelf. And that allowed me to basically put the camera mount on that shelf, and it's kind of separated from where I was touching it. Alright, let's put in a little more maiden flesh here. Lighten this up. I don't want to say ever so slightly, but slightly enough. I'm going to throw one more. I'm going to water this down. If you want to use flow improver, any of those mediums here, whatever they are, feel free. It's your painting, it's your army. So that's just a touch lighter now. Man, as can happen when you're doing this, each time you lighten it and go over it, there's a little less to paint each time. The hilarious thing is when you mix like this, especially if it's a more simple mix where it's just these two colors going together, sometimes you end up with the most color at the end because you're adding in more to lighten the color, and yet you're painting it in less physical space, if that makes any sense. This is very, my goodness, I can't emphasize how different this is from the last army painting. Well, the Easterlings probably was the closest one to this, I guess. Yeah, that's about the closest one to this. Where you had robes that were a certain color on the inside, a certain color on the outside. The horses were separate. Yeah, I think even the Lannisters were a very different animal than this. So like I said, the Army Painter Pledge, it gets you all of the previous tutorials. So if you sign on for the first time, you'll get all of the series 1 through 6. And if it gets to be 1 through 10, you'll get all of those because you need the previous ones. Because I think you can tell just by watching this that they build on each other. I do one. There is a rhyme or a method to the madness, a rhyme to the reason, however you want to phrase it. I even try to add in things like the Dark Sword videos. So that's something else you get with the Army Painter Pledge. You also have access to those because that's another way for me to introduce you in a small scale way to materials, concepts that you're eventually going to see in an army painting exercise. Let's say it's a basing theme. Well, I know with a lot of the Dark Sword ones, I'll either do maybe some kind of design on a marble base or maybe a water effect, waterfall, foliage. Here, again, this is an unusual thing for me because the foliage extends to nothing more than a clump of static grass, maybe on each one. That is so not me. That is definitely not my normal way of basing. But definitely, for you guys, you'll want to go a little bit further on your army than, say, just simple static grass, or the basic snow effect, where it looks like you essentially took the Elmer's glue and the snow flock and you spread it out in little globs on your base. It sort of looks like snow, but everybody looking at it kind of knows, well, yeah, that's a glob of glue with snow flock. If you combine a few different techniques together, say like the crushed glass and the woodland scenics with the Vallejo snow texture, and then hit some icicles there by using the heavy gel, now all of a sudden it looks more realistic, and people will say, oh man, how'd you do that effect? How'd you do the icicles? Why does your snow, it looks like it's almost melted here, but it looks more frozen over here? Those are the type of things that'll get people to want to look at your army a little longer. And if you're in the tournament scene and you want to either get best painted army or player choice, you'll have more votes. The way you get more votes is that more people standing around looking at your army, talking about it. And if they can tell there's some interesting and different techniques, or you went a little further on your army than most, whether it's basing, freehand. Obviously here there's no real freehand on these either. I think you saw on my Celtic themed army they had woe down their faces, tattoos, those Celtic knotwork in places. But there was a story to the army, and I was trying to tell the story. And in order to tell that story, I had to go all out and create those different elements. It also meant that I was still painting miniatures a few hours before the tournament started. That was not so fun. As in, like, plaid freehand on those Rough Riders. So yeah, see, I gotta go there, the edge of that. We'll get a little more light over here. Where are we at? We got 2 more with this. And as always, I've got my color test miniature to refer to as to how much further I go. Pictures are fine, but boy, it's nice to have not just a miniature in hand, but as soon as you look at it, you get a little more recall and you say, oh yeah, I did that over here. So we'll continue to lighten this up here. Right here, and all the while I've been cleaning up this little, the red that's along the edge, which is, that's the next thing we're going to tackle. And I can probably imagine some people say, oh man, that's going to be really rough. Actually, the red was not quite so difficult as it just might seem out of the blue. I thought actually it was going to be more difficult than it was. It's almost more difficult kind of painting the epaulettes. Okay, we will now put in more here. Make that a little more. See how that's turned almost like a grayish blue? See, that's what we've sort of got here. Let's go with this guy. Again, the crest of the hat. Now you're going to start to see the folds really emerge with each brush stroke. See that? There we go. These elbows sort of pull that cloth tighter. You end up with some really sharp folds that way, so we're trying to get the tops of those. Also trying to think not just folds, but okay, it's top of the shoulder. We need to get some light up there. Yeah, those shoulders are a little bit too dark. That's better. And let's say for whatever reason I go, oh my goodness, all of this stuff is too light. Well, what's to say I don't take some of that blue liner that I originally used to darken down the shadows on these and do some of that again. Some really tight controlled glazes, right? Using that blue liner, because you could see how nifty that is for glazing. Does a really nice job. All right. Right here, same thing on this guy again. For whatever reason, I just was lacking in what I was doing on the shoulders here. In some places, maybe the folds, the way they were cast or something like that, may be a little wonky. Sometimes you have to kind of edit those with your brush. There's been times where I said, man, I don't like that shape. Now, especially when it's resin like this, my first editing process is usually the file. I'll say, you know what? Nope, not going to be a fold there. I'm just going to file it away. So I've done that. I've definitely said, yeah, not liking the shape of that. Or, ooh, that's going to be a nightmare to paint. That just popped into my head. I don't know how many times I've done that. But certainly every time an army project has come along. Heck, practically every single miniature. I say, yeah, it's either sculpted a little oddly or just the way it cast wasn't clean, so now it's weird for painting. I'll just literally file it away, just scrub it off. Tends to, with weapons, I know I do that a lot. Sometimes folds, hair. And well, you know what it means to deal with mold lines. Sometimes a mold line just cuts through an area that otherwise would be really nice, but instead turns it to mush. I have been known to just say the heck with it. Let's say like this filigree stuff here. Sometimes I'm tempted to just file that off and paint my own freehand pattern on there. Because if there's a mold line that's running through that, it's going to be a you-know-what. I try and file through that mold line and keep that filigree pattern that's sculpted in. I have freehand designs that I know on Series 1, Series 3, Series 4. Not so much on Series 5 because that was the Army of the Dead. So I think the only ones that don't really feature any kind of freehand would be Series 2 and Series 5. There may come a point where I don't really remember which series is which. Already having a hard time. There's that many series done. My goal also, in the case of things like especially Song of Ice and Fire, where I may need multiple units of something. So let's say I need 2 crossbow units or 2 halberd units. That's where I would think about maybe one of those 2 is painted in oils. Or say the halberd unit, just like we were doing the metallics here. Think of what sky, earth, true metallic metals would be like on a series. I will be, like I said, to be doing more of these Victoria Miniatures, so you'll be seeing, obviously, they all have to have metals on them because we have to keep things consistent, so you will see plenty more in the way of metals. On these. Gotta get some lights down here. Some of these folds. And we're really on the verge of that real dramatic color. Or lighter color. So just a couple more here. Trying to make sure that the back of that gets enough light up at the shoulders. Remembering the brim of that hat. And I'm not just edge highlighting the hat or whatever. That's not what we're up to. You notice I'm not painting a whole bunch of highlights down here in that shadow area. It certainly makes sense after all we've been talking about. There's another hat here with the folds. And I think once the red is done, boy, that's really going to make a difference. There we go. We're just going to try and drop a few more. One here, around these pouches. Now let's get some more of our maiden flesh into this mix. Lighten this up. This is probably the last layer that I'm going to film. I may hit one more layer off camera. Again, it's more for photo purposes than what you would do. But we're also trying to keep this at that 2-hour mark. And oh, believe me, we'll get there. We'll get to the 2-hour mark with this one, no problem. And I get up at the shoulders there. So I'm going to try and get that one fold there. Let's go back to right here. Working our way down. The red's going to be pretty simple. Guess what? Just a couple of colors. We're going to use the one red that you saw that we were painting this red with, and then it's going to be lightened with clear yellow. It's the same right here. 1 second. Same stuff we used on the Epaulettes. So remember we were trying to stress the fact that the colors should kind of relate to each other. Well, if we're using the same thing to lighten the reds as we did to use on the very nearby Epaulettes, that makes sense. And again, I use my fingers an awful lot to just sort of blend things in, push paint around. It's pretty fun doing that. And once again, we need this to be a little lighter here. We got some folds. Now, if I do anything, like I said, if there's that one more layer of light, it would be in here, these folds that I hit, the ones that are facing upwards towards where the light source would be. So see here, this needs to be a bit lighter up here. It is you can see, I think now, why I saved well, one of the reasons why the red trim and such was saved for last. Just too many colors being painted around it. Way too many. So let's get these, see the tops of those folds. Again here, where it's sort of cinched up at the waist by his belt. And one more here. Yeah, definitely. Oh my goodness, need some way more light up on that shoulder there. And we'll definitely probably throw one more light highlight at the front of that hat. It's gonna match the bright highlight we put on the bill, although I may go in there with actually just a touch of white so that it has, you know, that plastic slash polished whatever look to it. It's always one way to make things look polished, is to just give them that one, boom, bright highlight dot there. But I'm just telling you about it because I don't know if you really need to see me put a dot of white at the end of each of these builds. It would be, well, you'll have it in the images. That's why I put images of stuff in the opening and closing credits. I know that I've never actually talked about those. Well, the opening credits, it's really supposed to tell you what we're going to do. But I think you notice there's basically scenes from the filming of it, so you can get a better sense of how the whole thing overall was looking. And I do recommend that as you're painting an army, they don't have to be professional photography pictures. But you will thank yourself later on if you at least try to get some kind of documentation on the process. It could make it easier to either replicate it later on or add more. I think of the armies that I'm trying to basically rebuild myself. Well, without pictures of those, I'm not going to have much success in trying to match them again. So any pictures are better than no pictures. But on the subject of photography here, the lights that I use, these are the same kind of LED lights that I use to paint by. they're nice because on camera, at least in video, they don't cycle. So you don't get the crazy little, well, you get fewer of the gray bars of death, as I like to call them. And when you see them, you know what they are. They are the scourge of filming. But the ones that I use, they're portable. Easy to move around, take from one location to the next. But I use them also for photographing the minis, because I can actually bend the neck of them into any shape that I need. And here we go. A little more here. So when I look at my photo, speaking of photos there, I can see there is one more kind of layer of lights that I need to do. So I'll at least do it on a couple here, so that you get to see what that's like and then look at how we're doing on time. And we've got one more to do with this layer. And like I said, we'll go in there with one more. One more hit of the maiden flesh into that dark gray blue. I think I've had people ask me a few times, so are those creature caster colors, is that going to be your new stuff? No, it's another tool. I may go through a period of a couple of months where I completely forget about them and don't use them. Yeah, I've already developed plenty of techniques long before those ever came out. So, I think sometimes people, they just want to use whatever the new thing is, and they kind of, I don't know. I spent years developing techniques with other materials, so I'm not just going to cast those aside for no reason. So I'm going to add, again, the maiden flesh to this one more time to get myself a nice light. Look at the difference in that to that. We started darker than that. Believe it or not. Not all that long ago, it was darker than that. So again, we're just going to find a few key spots here where there's some folds, and if need be, if I feel that I have to do it, I'll go back in with some of the blue liner and darken, reinforce the shadows maybe in that fold there. If I feel like I've got a lot of light but not enough shadow anymore. These folds especially important. And as we keep talking about context and everything, well, I want to see what happens with this red piping first. It's the same reason why we did the yellow on the epaulettes first, so we had something to compare next to. Some kind of context. I need to see how bright is that red going to be. Because right now, basically this blue is only compared against itself. And think of, say, like the epaulette, how light that is. So it makes everything underneath it look more dark. That red trim is going to do something very similar. So we're just working our way through. Again, the shoulder there. Now this one, it's all structured very different because he's got the shoulder pads as opposed to his shoulder epaulettes. Let's go a little light right there. couple more here. So I think you get what we're trying to do here. See, we're putting a few more light touches there. Some on the chest, one on the front of the hat. Not too much down there because that's in shadow. But up here, the shoulders definitely want some. Top of the hat. The back of the coat is here. Couple of more. Once again, top of the shoulder. And we need a few on here. Oh, wait. Don't want to forget a couple of folds in there. And we've got our big chief right here. He's got an awful lot of folds on that jacket. He's got obviously his hat here. This may, see, I think in the past I've done that with a red trim. Maybe I throw a gold trim on that. That's something I have to figure out yet. But that's not right now. So we just got a couple of these left. There again, minimal with the light highlights down there, just because it should all be in shadow. This is the area here. These folds just need a few little highlights. Take some of that paint away. And lo and behold, just about set with our coats and hats. And that leaves us with the last major element to do, and that'll be all those reds. So what we'll do is we'll throw that, whatever the red color is called, I think it's just basically called maybe bright red or something. Throw that out on the palette. We'll throw a little bit of the clear yellow. And we'll work the same kind of magic on that we did on the epaulettes, the pants, and the coats and hats. So stay tuned for that. It's coming up in just a bit. It's time to put our reds here on the stripes on the pants here. We've got the piping along the edge of the uniform coats. We've got collars here. More here on the epaulettes. And on our hats. For right now, what are we using? Just the straight up Sprite red right here. And you can see we've got the clear yellow sitting next to it because that's what we're going to use to lighten that up. The nice thing is, remember we put this stuff down and then we let a lot of the glazes, when we were doing the blue and such, we let those shade the red. That's that whole killing a couple of birds with one stone. Well, hopefully you're killing like 4 or 5 birds with one stone. That's way better. But even here, see, the idea is that you've shaded that red long before. So instead of, okay, now we have to do all of the red shade. Well, no, the shading's kind of there. And it's a little more natural because it's the same. The shading is very similar to the surrounding color, which is that dark blue. You really wouldn't want the shading of this red. I'm going to put a little red dot there. It wouldn't make sense for the shading of your red to be like a dark brown, because what's next to it, it's all of that blue. So we're trying again to think of a logical method or rationale. Remember we were talking about the stripes there and how they have to follow the lights and darks that we threw on the trousers themselves. So again, we're just playing off of what we've already gotten here, and I can see there's going to be 3 right here. That's where you can see it. So 1, 2, and 3 there, and now drag this along the piping there. Yeah, and if you do something like that, I'm just going to wipe it away. I know exactly what blues that I used if I need to paint back over the top of that. And we'll go back in here. Some more of this red. Work our way around this. And stuff like the cross here and these little doodads. It's not going to be anything more unusual and exotic than taking that metal medium, mixing it with, well, probably clear yellow, I would say. And then just to add some more lights to them, you know, some more dramatic highlights to, especially like the little imperial symbol there. Aquila, well, it's sort of an Aquila, not an Aquila. Similar enough to what guard guys wear so that everybody knows what's going on. Or in this case, guard women. Yeah, it's funny that I ended up with 6 guys and 4 female ones. I think, yeah, the difference was I wanted the swords. I think I had accidentally already painted one of the female figures with a chain sword. Yeah, so I didn't have that one available for this exercise. And some of these I have to do a little more with this particular red and some a little less. Once it gets to be past this stage, then they all will need pretty much the same amount of the yellow and red together. Again, that's in shadow, so not going to make it anywhere near as light as this, which is way just right out here exposed in the light. And we're going to use the thumb palette here. Just drag this across. And now what starts to happen is the coat will look a little darker again. So it's starting to look a little light. The pants are starting to look a little bit light. And there's nothing like having a color that's, well, warmer, brighter, and lighter in the vicinity to make another color seem a bit more subtle. That's the one way to do that. Alright, glasses guy here. Doing our stripes. That, I'm going to differentiate these 3 striations there. That's going to be more once I get my yellow in there. Definitely feel like I got to wait for the yellow in that section and get some highlights in there. And we're Again, on his hat, want to make sure there's lights where there should be lights and not go too crazy with highlighting shadow areas. Here we go on his bottom of the coat. Like so. Again, the back of the hat. Here we are on some cuffs again. And we've got the buttons, same thing, just mixing in the metal medium with some sort of, well, basically the yellows to make that gold. Let's say, you don't have metal medium. Well, if you got gold, and most of you are going to have gold metallics, just use the gold metallics. I would show you how to do the non-metallic version of that, but again, we're limited by what's requested, so this is why I'm trying to do some of the same subject matter, I guess, but in different mediums, different techniques. I even like to try and do say snow. I might do a whole nother army with a different type of snow effect, so that you get to have more weapons in your arsenal. And there we go. Here. On our red trim. We got his hat to do. Collar. It's interesting. Some of these reds, last time they were touched was a while ago. It's quite a while ago. We did those before we even did the skin tones. Seems like ages ago. And again, see, we're already starting to think about the differences between each of the steps of red there. And look, see, plenty of skin color got on that. Now you know why we waited till after the skin was done. So I suppose for the inside out proponents, there's one for you. You know, I did the deepest part of the figure first, so that when it came time to, you know, do this outer stuff, I didn't have to worry about going back in there again and trying to paint an eye or whatever. And there we are. Get his collar. That part of the epaulet needs to be red. His hat needs red up there. Just a couple more of these, and then we will start to add some yellow to this. And the clear yellow is very potent, so it's not going to take a bunch to make that noticeable. I believe I'm going to have to do one more segment after this, because I think some of these, the Laz Rifles have some targeting sights on there. You know, maybe we want to mess around with a little bit of these gold elements like the eagle on the hat and that sort of thing. Maybe even some hair on a few. So that would be more just odds and ends, really. I'm not sure if I'll call it that when I do the overlay screen. It would be kind of funny. Now one left. Boy, I remember what these looked like before. So actually here, what I'll do is I'll grab one of the other 19 here. Come on, that's better. Like so. And we'll just compare what those look like versus these. A little red there. Gotta hit this collar. The hat. So that kind of flops over the red trim there, so we'll just leave that. And now real quick, I'm just going to see if I can grab just one of these. Oh, look at this. There's she is with the chain sword. So yeah, you can see the big difference in what we've added here. We haven't even done the lightening of the red, which we are now about to do. So we've got that. Again, the clear yellow, pop that in there. Some more. And you can see how that gets orange and lighter as opposed to chalky. So many times I'll ask people, so what did you use to lighten your reds? And they'll say white. And I'll say, well, that's why you got chalky pink. Because you really would rather have your reds, if they're going to get lighter, become a bit more orangey rather than pink. Unless, of course, it's supposed to be either a skin tone, but say a tongue or lips or something like that. Well, there I don't know if you really want too many orange tongues. It would look too much like they'd eaten a few too many Cheetos. And we will work our way back through all these guys and ladies. And as I do, you'll see me start to separate some things like these extra little fold details on the stripe, the pants. Again, top of that collar, really important to get that. See the stripes on the pants here, that's starting to go down towards the ground. I'm not gonna do too much of that. That's in shadow. I think I've got, yeah, where you can see it. So not only does using that blue liner, the dark blue glazes here to shade the red, make it align with the pants color a bit more. These, as you can see, these are much warmer highlights we're starting to add, so they, by default, they get a little more contrast. Because what are they going up against? They're going up against a dark blue. an orange versus a dark blue, which is kind of on the muted side also. That's one nice way to get yourself some contrast. Well, it's not just contrast. You can get light and dark contrast, but I'm gonna say it's a more interesting type of contrast. And there's on his hat. Now I think when I did the red on my color test figure, I think I hit it at least 2 more times from where we're at now. We'll look at our time and see what we've got for that. If we can go on all 10, hit them twice. There we go with this. On his hat, on his collar. And then we've got these unusual cuffs here compared to all the other ones. I know I did those type of cuffs on a few of the Boer War. I forget what that faction is called. But sort of, you know, the British redcoats, colonial redcoats in their pith helmets. Here, let's get that. Back to another one of our guys here. I'm walking around with the las gun. One more. Here, we'll get pick up this fold there. Pick up that one there. And here we need the top of that collar, the red band on the hat, and if I see, like on my reference picture, I say, well, maybe that should actually be blue. Well, I can go back in later and hit that. I think I was following, see, these have basically solid red colors. So like I said, we always sometimes have to be willing to go back in and change things when they need to be. You know, sometimes fooling around when you don't have to, that's ill-advised. So again, we're just bringing out that. Getting a little bit of light on that section there. We need the hat to there. We've got another officer here to do. Hit his collar here. So what I will do then is, off camera, I'm gonna just hit those real quick with some blue. And it doesn't even have to be really shaded, because I can tell from that one there, just sort of a mid-range blue that's there. And since I'm using to paint the covers really well, it will not take much to correct that. Maybe I'll just do one or whatever real quick here. Depends. Yeah, actually some of that blue is still wet. Now that's the Creature Caster / Slow Fuse games, or Monument games, I guess, or whatever they're called. Can never quite keep all the names straight. There's a lot of them these days. Alright, so here I'm just going to wash off the brush real quick here. Get some of this red out of it. So there's our mid-range blue. Let's see if any of this is... No, that's still alive. Just boom. You see how tremendously hard it was to fix that? Look at this. It's so difficult. Wham. You know what? Screw it. We'll just do it on every one of these while we're thinking about it. Here's another one. And not on the girls because their colors are solid. And yeah, well, yeah. Okay, that's just, well, one more guy left here. See that? Tragedy averted rather easily. And then we return to our regularly scheduled reds. And this time, I'm just going to bring the red to the yellow. Here's a little more. Alright, now, bit on that color and on our cuffs. This is where I'm going to focus, see more on the outline of that, basically. And on the collar, not everywhere, just a few. Again, a few accents there, here. Along the trim. Again, the collar and that. This is what we're just going to do here on all 10. I know when I did, actually the very first, I think it was the very first video I ever made, it was sort of a practice type thing. Way back in the painting pyramid days. And I actually intentionally set up a few quote-unquote mistakes and then showed solutions for fixing them, and just like the old live classes that I used to do for pastels and watercolors, people to this day, they still remark about how easy it is for them to fix mistakes now, and they don't panic, there's no freaking out. And you saw how quick it was to go back to a more of a bluish color. Why is that? Because it didn't really matter what blue it was. I knew I could match it. It was real easy. Just two different colors to mix together, and eventually you're going to get the right one. Especially if they're still sitting out on the palette. Alright, next up here. And like I said, this is really focusing in on these, on the trim on these cuff sections and a few of the piping and stripe areas like this. Yeah, let's get that. And on his top of his collar. So yeah, oh my goodness, what a dramatic difference that makes. I can't believe it was literally just one brush stroke as I'm looking at it. It looks like more. It really does look like it was a harder thing to fix. But it wasn't. There we go. Get her up here better on camera for you to see. Once again, making sure we do that. So again, that little doodad there, that's going to be yellow, or orange, sorry. I did use a little touch of fluorescent on that, so here's this. I'll work this over here. And see, we're following those blue stripes with our orange highlights. Oh my goodness, seen too much of the British Baking Show, and I just kept wanting to say orange zest. Because be doggone if the first thing that happens after they say 3, 2, 1, bake is out comes the oranges, and they're shaving those down. Here's more of our highlights on these all-important cuffs, collar, hat. Back to the collar here. Another cuff. We're going to try and match again some of these folds. Remember we were talking about that idea of roundness? See how it's lighter, then it gets darker, then it gets lighter here as it's turning the corner. We have to sort of artificially create that sense of depth, that roundness there. Get rid of some of that. Again, get in a few of the lighter colors on the collar. So let's see, we have some orange things to do. Well, you know what, we'll just maybe throw a few lighter colors on the stones on the base. Maybe just throw one grass tuft on there so you get to see what that looks like. I get the grass tufts from, well, I'm starting to make my own. The one thing I don't have, I like to make even more of my own, but I don't have 6mm tall grass yet. I've got 2, I've got 4mm, don't have the 6. That's the key thing that I'm missing. Once I get that, then I can just make all of my own grass tufts. That's it. And that will, oh, I'll be really glad to have that control over the process. But Green Stuff World, what is that, Army Painter? I think it's armypainter.com, right? Because I use their, the Army Painter anti-shine. I use some of their laser pointers too in the battle reports. But yeah, they have some nifty grass tufts also. The grass tufts are way more common now than they used to be. Used to be way more difficult to get those, and certainly nowhere near the variety there is now. And this is one of the last figures here. So yeah, we're trying to get that roundness here. And then following these where the blue is lighter, we're trying to follow that up. Again, his collar. See if we can't get a little lighter on the brim of the hat here. See, we got the other leg to do. And this cuff. Another cuff over here needs a little bit of highlighting. And our last guy right here. We have him in focus, I think. Sometimes it can be hard for me to see whether things are either in focus or just in a place where I want them to be, because I am also looking through a magnifier light. So I'm not actually looking at the screen. Probably only 5% of the time am I actually looking at the screen to see what you can see. So sometimes I'll just do a little quick check and go, okay, that seems to be in focus. It seems to be on the screen. Alright, now that takes care of our red highlight, and just I've got a few seconds left here. Let's see if I've got my fluorescent orange somewhere easily available. I may not. Looks like not seeing fluorescent orange here. So if I can't find it right now, I'll just do that in a separate segment, but we are going to set it up first. Alright, so we're going to take some of this orange that we've got, and we're just going to drop that right here, and then we can put our fluorescent over the top of that. Let's identify which ones have that, which ones don't. There we go. Because what is it we're trying to do? Oh, he doesn't have that. Never mind. I think I was doing it on the other ones. Yeah. It was on the World Devils. That's what I was doing those on. I know I was doing those on these weapons. I think that's the last one. Yeah. And these don't need it. This doesn't need it. So we're going to set those aside. And like I said, we're going to go odds and ends. I think I'll just call it finishing details. Although I really do like the idea of odds and ends. So one last thing to get through here, and we'll call this squad here done. We're going to take care of a few odds and ends here. That's going to be mostly in the form of those medals, right? The little gold symbols, the Epaulets and everything. And I also wanted to throw a few more things on stuff like your weapons here, because we've gone back and forth a little bit. So you just want to get a few more lights on there. And then we also have to take care of other details like this, the little armor pads here. So this is basically a skull with some wings instead of the actual aqua there. Same thing over here. We'll hit a few of these buttons. We've got the belt buckle there. At the other side of this too. Let's see. Anything else? So the filigree here. I haven't necessarily decided if I will leave that metal-ish or if I'll just say, you know what, I'm just going to make it gold thread and just regular, not shiny gold thread. You can see that I've darkened this down a fair amount, which is why when it gets onto the surface here, it won't be too bright. And again, I'm not looking to do a whole lot with this. See, there's the skull there, and what we'll do is, like I said, we'll throw the gold on too. And if you can even see it, we'll throw some glazes over the top. Let's see, we got this side of it to do here. Can you see that? Sort of. What else is there? There's a little, oh, what would that be? Like a little metal stud that's on the epaulets there too. I think that's the right word for it. So here we got a little different, like a Laz rifle, and the other ones are more like assault guns. Assault rifles, sorry. That's just the bolt action in me talking right there. And let's see, we got buttons here, and we got a belt buckle here. We got a cartridge over here. And I'll move on, because I don't think that I have really used just the straight up metal medium yet to see just how bright of a highlight does that actually make. So we'll try that. We'll see what that does. So I'm just trying to get a little more light down here. Let's see what we can do. Yeah, just a touch right there. Again, the skull and wings on the cap. And he's got himself a medal right there, so that's something that I may have to take care of that off camera. And I believe just about, we got those, let's see if we have the same little, yep, there's a little one right there, and another one there. We move on to one of our officers. We've got his medal there, we got the symbol there. I think that pistol is mostly where we want that to be. Alright. And once again, got that little metal stud one there. Oh boy, I'll never see that. And then there's another one there. They're just really stuck in there. So let's do them before we even forget about them. And now, again, we'll get some of our lighter metals in here. There's a little bit of a, see, a bolt chamber there, obviously where shells are going to be exiting. And I may even go in again and darken some aspects of that. Throw a few more darks in there, but before we do that, as always, we want to make sure that we've got the opposite end of the spectrum settled. In this case, it's going to be actually the light. I want to see just how light can I go with the metal medium, because it's still kind of a new thing yet for me. It's, yes, I've used it now several times, but because you're essentially mixing it with all these other colors, it becomes a new color every time, if that makes any sense. It's almost like the first time using it. Because I'm trying to, okay, you know, this time I've mixed it with red. This time I know what it's like when I mix it with brown liner or blue liner, because we've done that often enough. And go. Is that where you can see it? I believe so. Just gonna make sure of my focus here. And then go in. Like so. We've got the little dots here to worry about. And now just a few more of these to do, and then I'll go in with some of that much lighter, pure, straight up metal medium and see how that highlights things. Alright, we already had worked on that, looks like. And the buttons are kind of hidden by the arms that are holding up the weapon in the firing position. So we move on. To this one. Seems like we had, oh, no, there's a button there that needs a little bit of the and a couple of those. Looks like we're reasonably well set. And here we go. We're going to see just how bright can get with the metal medium. I'm mostly going to focus on that barrel, because that seems to be, at least in a lot of the examples that I had to work from, it seems to be the thing that the barrels just, they get that brightest, oh, what the heck did it used to be called? Mithril silver or whatever. I'm just going to travel along some edges there. We'll pick up some highlights on those emblems. So here is the same thing. Gonna brighten up the barrel of that. And somehow I forgot one of those. Did I forget on the other side? Nope, I remembered on the other side. And I think we got the hat too. And here's this. Although it's interesting, I've been talking about how I see, you know, I forgot a stud here or a button there or whatever. And we talk about how the other Army Painter episodes have been so different from this. It's interesting when I forgot stuff on those. It was entirely different than this, where it's just, okay, here's one button that's forgotten. You know, there were some things where I had, just because I had the right color or whatever, especially Army of the Dead, where there was one that had practically most of the rust effects painted on it, and one that had almost none. Because there, unlike this unit, or the goal is to make everything darn near identical to each other. With the Army of the Dead, it was, well, here's a general guideline, and we'll go from there. Okay. I'll go once more. Next one up. So it's interesting. Wow, it is definitely, it's lighter than what was there. Even though it looks different on the palette, it doesn't necessarily lighten things up as much as I might expect when it gets to actually painting it on the miniature. So that's another important thing to note. And I'm trying to learn things along with you, because the way I see it, if I'm learning something for the first time that I didn't know, it makes it, I don't know, almost makes it kind of fun for you to see that maybe at the same time I do, or maybe you see it before I do, whatever, but that it's okay to, well, not know everything about stuff and go, oh, yeah, okay, that was not something that I knew before, or I never really tried that before. So I think those could be some pretty fun moments for you too. I know they are for me. Sometimes the learning process is more, shall we say, controlled or less painful. But I've definitely run across those painful lessons that you, oof, boy, kind of wish I knew that before that happened. And I guess we all run into those, and I think that's the other reason I try not to pre-plan as much things as I could. I don't want to say I'm hoping for mistakes or whatever, or disasters. But if something doesn't quite work out as expected, and I come up with some way to, some workaround, now you know that workaround also. What are we going to do? We're going to take, where is some of that secret weapon? Let's see if we've got some right here. Yeah, let's try some of this. So this is another secret weapon product here. There's a whole bunch of these type of things. So we got orange rust here. Let's see. I think I'm just going to have to go like that. I don't need much of it. I need just a tiny little bit. Tiny little bit. Because remember, we wanted to make some of these things not just darker, but a little bit more towards the gold side. So what are we doing here? We're making sort of a dark metallic gold glaze. Is that on the palette? Yeah, it is. And that is going to go in here. I guess we need to darken that down some more even. Here, let's get a little more. Like so. Just so that these and the buttons and the buckles are different from the weapon itself. Here we go. On the wings here. See, I'm just kind of going over the surface of the buttons a little bit. And maybe even on the ends of these. Yeah, let's do some of that too. I'm just gonna Now, since I have it, why not? I'm just going to throw that there. Makes the end of that gun look a little bit different. Do it here. And on a couple of the buttons. And that symbol there. Okay, we've got, this guy has his metal here. I'm going to do this on the end of this pistol. So we've got his iron cross there. Just trying to lend a little shape to that. Okay, we got this one here. Got the end of the muzzle here. And then after this, like I said, there's some stuff that I can only do here where I'm almost kind of holding my breath and really controlling what I can see and do. But before we exit the field, I'm going to throw a little bit of lighter color on the rocks. And I'll talk to you about tufts. We'll just throw one tuft down there. Again, you don't need to see me gluing grass tufts. That would definitely not be a good use of your time. What might be better is for you to see some of the homemade tufts that I've got so far, because I talked about them earlier, and I just thought it over and I said, yeah, I'll scrounge up the ones that I have left, because I've used up most of the ones that I've made. And alright, we'll just go with that. Good enough. And we'll do more later on, but for now, let's bring out one of our more filbert type brushes and let's see what we've got color wise here. So sort of that light grayish tan, and what we'll do is we'll throw out some of this. It's kind of a neat greenish gray. We'll throw that out there along with some of our original, what is that, the light umber, right? Pop that out there. Don't need very much. This will probably be as close as you see to sort of a dry brush. It's really not. See how that brush just fans out a little bit, but it holds way more pigment than, say, something like a regular filbert brush with those short bristles. See how I can just push that out in even more of a fan shape there? I'll pop some more here. A little more on this guy. And it was just basic rocks and gravel. If you've seen any of my other videos, whenever I'm doing rocks and gravel, I always throw down the heaviest gravel first and then go a little bit lighter. I also used some of the oxide paste on this base. Well, there's a lot of reasons I used it. Actually, one of the little hidden reasons is that these had the slot holes in them, and all of a sudden, if I just used regular glue, well, the glue would have leaked down through those holes onto the table. This would have been a mess. So I was able to use the oxide paste, which really does a fantastic job of it's a structural type thing. It has some adhesion to it, but it also has texture and it has structure. So you can, I use it for, actually I use it on terrain also. It's pricey on, to use on giant terrain pieces, but for dioramas, for larger bases, artillery teams, where I need to have a, say, a mound of earth or whatever in front of them, like they've dug out a little foxhole for themselves. That's really where that does well. And so there you go. We've got quick lightening of the rocks. One last one to go here. And we've lightened up our rocks. So let's look at grass tufts. Now these are the ones that I've been using here. I believe these are from Army Painter. But here's ones that I have made myself, and unfortunately just a lot of them are gone. So this is some of these flower tufts. I also had shrub tufts, but those have all been used. So here's the nifty thing, is that, say, I can make my grass tufts all these different sizes, even different shapes. The one thing I'm missing, and I think you can see it here, is see how long that grass is. That's the thing that I need to, that's the thing I need to get. I'm just going to pick a guy, any guy. Here's a guy. And this is always a good spot right here. Gonna throw in a touch of super glue there. It's always handy to have one of these push pins. We're gonna grab ourselves a tuft. So we place it there, take the pin, shove that down, and then spread it out. See, that was just quick and easy, not painful. See, I try to leave open spaces like that for, there's my glue, here's my glue. We throw down the glue, bang, poof. See, we just shove that right in there. We got ourselves a nice little grass tuft. I really love the bigger ones, but sometimes you just gotta conserve. So it is possible to do something like this, where you just cut it in, say I just cut it in half. Let me get my other half out here. We'll find, here's a good spot. So see what we're gonna do? Put the glue along here. We'll grab this, put it on the end of my pin, shove it right there. Splay that out. So now, see how that kind of silhouettes his foot a little bit right there, and it looks like he's kind of tromped on some of the grass. And guess what? I just got 2 tufts for 1. And when you're talking about this many figures that need tufts, you know, those giant tufts, again, I love them. I use them a lot on my other larger, like artillery pieces and stuff. But, you know, here, I'll just put that right there. We're doing the same thing. So we've got, as we're thinking about design here a little bit, composition. I know, as simple as this is, it starts to turn it into a little mini diorama. Instead of just plopping a piece of grass like right here in front of them. I try to make it a little more structural, just like that. So, as we throw on one more tuft or two, I just want to say thanks again for watching. And if you're already subscribed to the Patreon page and you're seeing this, I want to say thanks a lot, because it makes a huge difference. I would not be able to do any of these things. The only reason I can do this is because people have done the Army Painter pledges. And once again, you go to the Patreon page, it's just James Wappel, patreon.com. You sign up for that and you get more than just the Army Painter stuff. You get any other videos that I film. You get some of the Dark Sword things, because again, I try and use some things on a small scale there and then present him to you in the army painting tutorials on a more massive scale, like what we did here with these 10 figures. Yeah, one more tuft here. Again, push that down. Sometimes they get a little persnickety, but that's where the pin helps. You can see there's glue stuck to the pin, but there's not glue stuck to me, and that's always a good thing. So I just want to say thanks again for watching, and I will catch you again on the next series, or several series, as may be the case. And, you know, if you want to like this, share it, whatever, that's fantastic, and it's much appreciated. Thanks a lot.